Triplet Targaryens in A Song of Ice and Fire? What madness is this? I'm Richard York, Asher's trueborn son. Welcome back to my channel discussing unconventional theories about A Song of Ice and Fire, the book series beginning with A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Please like and subscribe. Spoilers ahead, including for the world of Ice and Fire. You have been warned. In our previous episodes, we discussed how George is combining history's greatest identity crisis and most famous secret wedding with mythology's most famous secret wedding. But we need to consider a few other aspects of what he is trying to accomplish. The books are also about combining the best elements of history, myth, legend, pop culture, and literature. Oedipus is included in these myths, with Bael the Bard, Tyrion killing Tywin, and especially with Jaime killing Aerys and secretly having an incestuous relationship with his new queen. The books consistently blend the symbolism and patterns from different sources and repeat these symbolic patterns over and over again with different twists. George doesn't just have one character sacrifice his right arm for justice, like the Norse god Tyr. He has hand, arm, or finger sacrifices with Catelyn, Donal Noye, Davos, Qhorin Halfhand, Jon Snow, Jaime, Joffrey, the Great John Umber, Lady Hornwood, Theon Greyjoy, Victarion Greyjoy, Three-Finger Hob, Ollo Lophand, and perhaps especially Maester Luwin, with his logic and laws represented with the chain of 7 different materials, including Valyrian steel. Maester Luwin tries restraining Bran and the direwolves, very much like Tyr restraining the wolf Fenrir with a chain of 6 different magic materials. Similarly, Odin sacrificed an eye for knowledge, and George has many characters with one eye injured, such as the last Greenseer, formerly known as Brynden, Beric Dondarrion, Jack B. Lucky, Timett son of Timett, Crowfood Umber, Jon Snow, Jaime, Lambert Turnberry, and others. People think that George has too many of some of his repeated patterns, and yet he must not have been nearly obvious enough with parents and children repeating each other's actions and with secret bastards, because most people still have not seen Eddard Stark's children as long-faced Edward IV of House York's secret bastards, despite the hints at Eddard Stark's marriage matching Robb's marriage. With that in mind, let's talk about Lannister bastards. I don't mean the Baratheons, who are really Lannisters. I mean the Lannisters, who are really Targaryens. I will mostly leave Tyrion's possible parentage to Preston Jacobs with his 3-minute science update video. However, it might be worth noting, if the chimeric theory is correct, Tyrion killed his biological father, like Oedipus and Jaime and Bael the Bard's son, but the Queen's dragons could still be fond of him. His one shrewd eye might point at this symbolism. We will explore shrewd eye symbolism in our next episode. Back to Tyrion's siblings. First, let's note an author's annotation from the Annotated Eye books and Targaryen history both contradict what Dany, Cersei, the Maester's histories, and characters throughout the story tell us about Targaryen incest. The Targaryens did not keep their bloodline pure, according to an author's annotation. We see in the history they frequently attempted to arrange political marriages, but those efforts were often thwarted by their children's incestuous attraction to each other. When Ned confronts Cersei about the incest, she brings up the Targaryens. When Catelyn finds out, she wonders if even Cersei would be so mad, and then thinks of the Targaryens. Jaime suggests Cersei marry him, like the Targaryens, and Cersei tells him he is talking madness. She tells him they are not Targaryens, and he tells her quiet. Honestly, the incest and discussion of madness and Targaryens, pointing to the mad Targaryen king, should be enough to convince anyone, but George gives us so much more. There are strong hints that Joffrey and Cersei are following in the footsteps of Mad King Aerys. In A Clash of Kings, Sir Aerys Oakheart tells Sansa, "King Joffrey sits where Aegon the Dragon once sat, in the castle built by his son." Sir Aerys said, "He is the dragon's heir." After Pycelle tips off Cersei about Myrcella's engagement, Tyrion jokingly asks Cersei, "Did you plan to marry her to Tommen?" This is actually a dig at Cersei and Jaime, but it also hints at the history of their Targaryen blood. Similarly, Jaime thinks about wedding Joffrey to Myrcella to show the realm that the Lannisters are above their laws, like gods and Targaryens. The wildfire is also a strong clue. Tyrion realizes he needs to keep Joffrey away from Hylene the Pyromancer, and twice we get Cersei's wildfire eyes. From Tyrion's 8th chapter in A Clash of Kings, candlelight gleamed green as wildfire in Cersei's eyes. And then, from Sansa's 6th chapter, the queen was drinking heavily, but the wine only seemed to make her more beautiful. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes had a bright, feverish heat to them as she looked down over the hall. Eyes of wildfire, Sansa thought. So with candlelight gleaming and feverish heat, Cersei's eyes are burning wildfire. One of the main points of George creating parallels between biological relatives is to hint at the secret marriage of Eddard Stark. Ned needed a promised marriage alliance with the Riverlands Lord to stop Mad King Aerys when he married Ashara Dane. Robb needed a promised marriage alliance with the Riverlands Lord to stop the Mad King's double biological grandson, Joffrey, when he married Jane Westerling. Tywin and Tyrion both realized Joffrey is like Aerys from Storm of Swords. It was Joffrey he addressed. Aerys also felt the need to remind men that he was king, and he was passing fond of ripping tongues out as well. After Cersei interrupts, Tywin continues, "And any man who must say, 'I am the king,' is no true king at all. Aerys never understood that, but you will." Tywin goes on to say, "I did not fight a war to seat Robert II on the Iron Throne." "Not Robert II, Tyrion said, "Aerys III. Cersei first mentions, and eventually settles on, Orton Merryweather to replace Tywin Lannister as Hand for Tommen, citing Merryweather's grandfather, who replaced Tywin Lannister as Hand for Aerys. This grandfather reference is a very nice wink to the relationship of the two kings, Tommen and Aerys. After Cersei mentioned Orton Merryweather and the grandfather relationship, she suggested she might name Hylene the Pyromancer as Tommen's hand, citing Aerys and his final hand, Rosart the Pyromancer. In A Storm of Swords, we have a direct association of Cersei with Aerys. Jaime curled up beneath his cloak, hoping to dream of Cersei, but when he closed his eyes, it was Aerys Targaryen he saw. Aerys Targaryen was famous for going through hands and for burning his hand, Carlton Chested, and Rickard Stark, the father of Ned Stark. In A Feast for Crows, Cersei thought of all the king's hands that she had known through the years. Owen Merryweather, John Cunnington, Carlton Chested, Jon Arryn, Eddard Stark, her brother Tyrion, and her father, Lord Tywin Lannister, her father most of all. All of them are burning now, she told herself, savoring the thought. They are dead and burning, every one, with all their plots and schemes and betrayals. It is my day now. It is my castle and my kingdom. Jaime later recalls that moment. Even in the baleful glow, Cersei had been beautiful to look upon. She'd stood with one hand on her breast, her lips parted, her green eyes shining. She is crying, Jaime had realized, but whether it was from grief or ecstasy, he could not have said. The sight had filled him with disquiet, reminding him of Aerys Targaryen and the way a burning would arouse him. But the clues for Jaime are much better than the parallels and similarities between Mad Queen Cersei and Mad King Aerys. In A Game of Thrones, Jaime is transformed by moonlight. His gold hair is silvered, combining silver and gold. His red cloak is turned black, combining red and black. The traditional Targaryen hair is silver gold, and the traditional Targaryen colors are red and black. So the moonlight is revealing Jaime as a Targaryen. Even at a distance, Sir Jaime Lannister was unmistakable. The moonlight had silvered his armor and the gold of his hair, and turned his crimson cloak to black. Moonlight traditionally symbolizes purification, revealing the true self. So this might be the most blatant, symbolic clue in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. Trust the symbolism. This clue does have a close rival in the nearly identical clue that the first head of the dragon is half gray-eyed Maid of Winter and half Secret Targaryen, which we will discuss in the final episode of this series. George tells us he is doing Oedipus, the unknowing kinslain of the king by his own son, followed by incest with his new queen. In A Clash of Kings, according to Ygritte, Bale the Bard was king beyond the wall and led the free folk south. It was young Lord Stark who met him at the frozen ford and killed him, for Bale would not harm his own son when they met sword to sword. So the son slew the father instead, said Jon. Earlier in the same book, the height of folly was reached when a plump fool came capering out in gold-painted tin with a cloth lion's head and chased a dwarf around the tables, whacking him over the head with a bladder. Finally, King Renly demanded to know why he was beating his brother. "Why, your grace, I'm the Kinslayer," the fool said. "It's Kingslayer, fool of a fool," Renly said, and the hall rang with laughter. George is deliberately associating Jaime becoming the Kingslayer with Jaime becoming the Kinslayer. In the same book, he tells us he is doing Oedipus. Much like Oedipus, Jaime has an incestuous relationship with his new queen after killing the king, his secret biological father. Tywin and his sister Jenna both have some things to say about Jaime's parentage. From A Storm of Swords, "You are not my son." Lord Tywin turned his face away. "You say you are the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and only that. Very well, sir. Go do your duty." In A Feast for Crows, from Tywin's sister Jenna, "Jaime," she said, tugging on his ear, "sweetling, I have known you since you were a babe at Joanna's breast. You smile like Geryon and fight like Tig, and there's some of Kevin in you, else you would not wear that cloak. But Tyrion is Tywin's son, not you. I said so once to your father's face, and he would not speak to me for half a year. Men are such thundering great fools, even the sort who come along once in 1,000 years." Note, this was some time ago, before Tyrion had any real accomplishments. Tywin wouldn't talk to his sister for half a year. That sounds like Jenna hit a nerve. But back to Jaime killing his father. From A Storm of Swords, "Bring me your father's head if you are no traitor." And earlier, we learned what followed, when Jaime killed the pyromancer Rosart and then went to Aerys. When Aerys saw the blood on his blade, he demanded to know if it was Lord Tywin's. "I want him dead, the traitor! I want his head! You'll bring me his head or you'll burn with all the rest!" So ironically, Aerys ordered Jaime to kill his father, which he did. I love these books. Let's discuss the history. George presents history through the Maesters, including Pycelle, slanted to benefit the Lannisters, but wants to include the details that would lead us to the truth. There are 5 paragraphs in The World of Ice and Fire that tell us the truth, obscured through wording such as seldom. Seldom, especially when speaking of past events, implies more than once. In other words, occasionally. If you never did something, especially in the past, you would say never. While we are discussing manipulative language, not long thereafter departing at once is in fact almost the exact opposite of departing at once. It means, from the perspective of the marriage, departing sometime later. So here's what these 5 paragraphs tell us. The first paragraph implies Joanna and others were removed for affairs with Aerys. The second paragraph tells us about rumors of Joanna as the king's paramour. Anytime George includes rumors, he wants us at least considering they might be true. The third paragraph reminds us again Joanna was removed for sleeping with Aerys, and tells us this was sometime after she married Tywin. George slips in "departed at once for Casterly Rock" after he tells us some time passed after the wedding, a somewhat misleading use of the words "departed at once." And then she occasionally returns, using the word "seldom" to describe past events. It is an amazingly manipulative way to trick readers into thinking Joanna did not continue sleeping with Aerys after her marriage, even while all the facts clearly indicate she was continuing to sleep with him, and was in fact fired for sleeping with him sometime later, referred to in a history book with the vague time frame of "not long thereafter." The 4th and 5th paragraphs imply the king succeeded in impregnating Joanna despite his inability to get a healthy child from Rhaella. Showering the children with gold is included to confirm our suspicions that Aerys considers these children special, despite his strained relationship with Tywin. Interestingly, the 4th paragraph contains the word "bastard," the only use of the word "bastard" in the history from the start of the Aerys II section through the Fall of the Dragons and the Glorious Reign of King Robert sections of The World of Ice and Fire. It is quite a clue that the only use of the word "bastard" when Aerys or Robert are king is in the paragraphs about Joanna, Aerys, and the birth of the Lannister twins. Here are the 5 paragraphs. Sadly, the marriage between Aerys II Targaryen and his sister Rhaella was not as happy. Though she turned a blind eye to most of the king's infidelities, the queen did not approve of his "turning my ladies into his whores." Joanna Lannister was not the first lady to be dismissed abruptly from her grace's service, nor was she the last. Relations between the king and queen grew even more strained when Rhaella proved unable to give Aerys any further children. Miscarriages in 263 and 264 were followed by a stillborn daughter born in 267. Prince Daeron, born in 269, survived for only half a year. Then came another stillbirth in 270, another miscarriage in 271, and Prince Aegon, born 2 turns premature in 272, dead in 273. The scurrilous rumor that Joanna Lannister gave up her maidenhead to Prince Aerys the night of his father's coronation and enjoyed a brief reign as his paramour after he ascended the Iron Throne can safely be discounted. As Pycelle insists in his letters, Tywin Lannister would scarce have taken his cousin to wife if it had been true, for he was ever a proud man and not one accustomed to feasting upon another man's leavings. It has been reliably reported, however, that King Aerys took unwanted liberties with Lady Joanna's person during her bedding ceremony, to Tywin's displeasure. Not long thereafter, Queen Rhaella dismissed Joanna Lannister from her service. No reason for this was ever given, but Lady Joanna departed at once for Casterly Rock, and seldom visited King's Landing thereafter. At first, his grace comforted Rhaella in her grief, but over time his compassion turned to suspicion. By 270 AC, he had decided that the queen was being unfaithful to him. "The gods will not suffer a bastard to sit the Iron Throne," he told his small council. None of Rhaella's stillbirths, miscarriages, or dead princes had been his, the king proclaimed. Thereafter, he forbade the queen to leave the confines of Maegor's Holdfast, and decreed that 2 septas would henceforth share her bed every night, to see that she remains true to her vows. What Tywin Lannister made of this is not recorded, but in 266 AC at Casterly Rock, Lady Joanna gave birth to a pair of twins, a girl and a boy, healthy and beautiful, with hair like beaten gold. This birth only exacerbated the tension between Aerys II Targaryen and his hand. "I appear to have married the wrong woman," his grace was reported to have said, when informed of the happy event. Nonetheless, he sent each child its weight in gold as a name-day gift, and commanded Tywin to bring them to court when they were old enough to travel, "and bring their mother too, for it has been too long since I gazed upon that fair face," he insisted. I would say it had been 8 or 9 moons. Note, this section also strongly implies it was no longer possible for Rhaella and Aerys to produce healthy children, long before Dany came along. Ned approaches his investigation into Jon Arryn's death with information from scurrilous rumors most readers lack. Namely, Ned suspects Jaime and Cersei are descended from a magical bloodline with a long history of brother and sister insisting on coupling, even when a marriage was arranged to prevent them. Ned assumes Cersei's lover is Jaime. Sometimes a leap in logic is not a plot hole, but an indication we lack knowledge the character possesses. Gray Area and Bridge 4 have made videos on this topic, and both present additional evidence of Cersei being compared to fire or the Mad King, and discuss how Joanna Lannister implies Tywin did not have a son who became a knight, nor a daughter who became queen. Thanks to them and others for discussing this previously. Let's give Tyrion the final word on this topic. In A Game of Thrones, George had already identified at least half a dozen close relatives of Tyrion. Keeping in mind, most means more than half, when Jon Snow calls Tyrion friend, Tyrion responds, "Most of my kin are bastards." In our next episode, we will discuss how at least 4 characters in the Kingsguard disappear and reappear multiple books later without really dying. Kingsguard are called brothers, so join us as we examine the young brother, Loras Tyrell, and elder brothers, Arstan Whitebeard, Sir Robert Strong, Sandor Clegane, and the others. We will have to use shrewd eyes for this next one. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, 7 blessings.